Hello, Internet peoples. I am Mitternacht, and I'm doing a video inspired by Two Gryphon's kind of talky, personal videos where he just sort of sits down and talks for a while. And he talked about this recently on this week's episode about just wanting to sit down and just kind of just talk about stuff like you talk to a person and just kind of be an e-friend, I guess. And a lot of people out there are really lonely. A lot of people out there use YouTube for conversations like this just to have someone to talk to. So that's kind of what I want to do. Just sit here, play a bit of Hearts of Iron, and just chill out with you guys. And hopefully you can learn a bit about me. And if you get active in the comments, or maybe in the future we can do these kind of games together. I don't know. It's an experiment. We'll see how it goes. So, a little bit about me. I am Mitternacht. I am 22. I currently live in the Midlands in England. I'm a dual UK-US citizen. I'm starting Phase 1 Army training in just under a month. And just kind of chilling right now. I guess getting ready, training, working out a lot. Getting ready for Army training soon. And I like to do these little projects every now and again to keep myself busy, and hopefully someone out there likes it. But I guess you'll be the judge of that. So this is Hearts of Iron 4, which is a grand strategy game based around 1930s, 1940, 1950. The entire world mainly focuses on Europe, but there is stuff for Russia and Japan to do. So basically it's World War II simulator, as I like to call it. In this game I played Japan. I started in 1936, and I am currently kicking China's ass with my two little puppet places here. Japan already starts with Korea already occupied, and we're just invading China. And hopefully we can beat the Chinese before World War II starts, but we only have about a year and a half left to do that, so that's probably not going to happen. But, you know, we're mainly not here for the game. That's probably going to be background stuff. Mainly we're just here to talk about stuff. So, Two has been a friend of mine for well, I say friend. I haven't really started talking to him until he started doing his Patreon stuff, but I've been listening to his stuff since I was 14. And at that time, I was living with my parents. And my family are all Mormons, which are a branch of Christianity. And Christians can be annoyingly hard to live with sometimes, for obvious reasons. I broke away from the church when I was about 14, 15, and listening to old Two Cents episodes used to be one of the only ways I had any kind of friendship or kind of voice around that wasn't the religious voice of my parents or people at school. And being a bit of a nerdy kid, I did get bullied at school a little bit, which I suppose now I look back on it and I'm kind of glad it happened, because now I'm tougher for it. And I suppose that's a good thing. But being bullied is not fun. It feels like the whole world's against you at the time, because when you're a kid and you're in school, your entire world is school. You know, you don't have anything else other than that, apart from your home life, and if your home life is shit. And I'm not saying I had the worst home life. My parents were, you know, they were Christians, so it wasn't like they were that bad, and they're practicing Christians. Which means, you know, they do believe in being charitable, being good people most of the time. And I don't even want to say for a second that I had the worst childhood ever, because that's just a really ignorant thing to say. But I could never be myself around them, and I'm sure a lot of other people feel this way around their families, that they just can't be their real true selves and really act the way they'd like to act, because it's just, you know, you have to hide a lot about yourself, so because you're worried about your parents judging you. And I'm sure that's a problem for a lot of people anyway, but it's more so if you're a person who's not straight or a furry and you're living with religious Christian parents. It's really not fun. Just gonna stick all my army in the north into one line here, because having them all in the same line is much easier than having to micro them all the time. That shouldn't affect their current orders. No, it doesn't. This isn't going well, is it? But, yeah, parents can suck. And for a lot of people, it isn't an issue, because a lot of people just have good parents that just actually listen to them and let them express themselves and don't judge them or ridicule them. And I'm not saying that they do that in a bad way. Sometimes just parents do it in a kind of silent way, and you know, most people know their parents well enough that they know what not to say to them. They just, you know, if you know your parents better than anyone as a kid, and you know what your parents want to hear and what they don't want to hear. But I'll tell you this: once you get out of your parents' house, it all changes. And life, even though you might have less money, less food, and less human company, overall, I gotta say, I do definitely prefer life, even as a single person who has a bit of lonely spouts every now and again, but you know, who doesn't? Who doesn't? So why am I playing Hearts of Iron 4? I mentioned what the game was, but I personally have a very big interest in world history. I tend to focus on World War One and Two and some earlier stuff, like the Protestant uprising in Europe and lots of stuff like that. Because I find history fascinating. Because for me, history's sort of like, here's the mistakes that we did in the past. Let's try not to do those again, yeah? And best way to learn how to do that is often to know where you went wrong. And for all of for the current political tense situation of America trying to always poke at Russia, it's just going back in history. This happens a lot, and you've got to learn from what went wrong in the past to make sure we don't end up in a stupid, pointless war again. Of course, this war isn't pointless because I am Japan, and China must capitulate to the greater Asian empire. But having a religious family can make it hard for a lot of reasons. Some of them are the fact you can't talk to them about your sexuality. You can't talk to them about your sexuality. You can't talk to them about. Oh, hold on. My brain's frozen there. I can't talk to them about what you're replacing God with, because a lot of Christians are under the impression that once you lose God, that you've chosen the wrong way and you're lost, and That's just not true, is it? Because this might not be true for some people, but personally, I've replaced religion with ethics and philosophy, and I think those do a much better job than religion did. Because religion, you have to have the dogma, and you have to have the belief, and that's all nice. It's nice to have that, and it's nice to have the community that the church gives you. But when you have just ethics as a standalone concept, you don't need all that stuff. Oh, surrounding a division here, which is always a good thing. Okay, that guy doesn't want to die, does he? That is unfortunate. If you have no idea what I'm clicking on, don't worry if you're actually watching this and not alt-tabbing it while you do something else. Which you're more than welcome to do. This is just something to for people who are actually watching this and not just alt-tabbing it somewhere. This mic is pretty bad. I do need to get a new one. This is a built-in Razer mic for one of their headphones, and it's not the best, but it'll do. Something I think that I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people do, is the procrastination motivation part of your brain that just doesn't want to go on. And by on, I mean it doesn't want to help you with certain things. Like when you wake up in the morning, you know you should get up and you should go for your morning jog and you should do all this stuff, and that's all good, but your brain doesn't work like that. Your brain wants immediate rewards for anything that it does. So your brain wants to immediately get the dopamine surge of sticking on a YouTube video or sitting down and playing some games for a bit before you do any work. And all that stuff is nice. Your brain doesn't work like that, does it? Human brain's not developed to work in a modern society. It's been a thing in human brain is sort of like a work in progress, isn't it, for evolution? There's a lot of things about it that seem to not really work with how we are now. Which is one of the reasons that we do things like procrastinate and why we don't want to work hard now for something that might reward us later, because our brain likes sugar, it likes immediate chemical surges to make you feel better. And while the smart, thinking, active part of your brain might know that doing that thing is bad in the long term, in the short term, your brain's getting that rush of chemicals that makes it feel good. So, of course you're going to do it. Because your brain's just not wired to work the way it should. And that's not a thing a lot of people struggle with. At least it doesn't seem like they do. And if they do, props to them, because they have more self-control and more self-determination than some people do. And I'm really jealous of people that can just constantly be creative and constantly do what they need to do and not get distracted. And I mean, there is some determinism to that. Some people do just have better genes for stuff like that, but I'm sure not all of them do. I'm sure some people just have the willpower to keep doing that. And I think Penn from Penn and Teller talked about that once. He said that motivation and willpower isn't necessarily an inbuilt characteristic trait like many people seem to think it is. It's actually like it's an energy of sorts because you can run out of willpower. And because he talked about how when he went on, I think it was The Apprentice or something, he was on a diet at the time, but he just didn't have the energy to keep doing it while he was filming because being around people all day and trying to output all the time, that would just drains you, and I imagine it would. And his willpower just got sapped from that. And I can really understand that because that's why a lot of people like to do all this stuff in the morning when they're energized and they feel like they can do what they need to do to get their goals for that day done. Because by the evening, sometimes you're just dead. Speaking of dead, People's Republic of China is losing ground ever so slowly. We're playing in speed 1, so I don't have to actually like micro hard. Because yeah, 1 division against 12. Let's not do that. That would be good. So the Chinese really threw a lot of stuff against the southern invasion. And they didn't seem to care all that much about my northern invasion because I landed here earlier and just kind of walked over them all. I don't. Because in real life, the Japanese didn't go that deep into China. They kind of stuck to the coastal areas because that's where they could resupply their men, I imagine. So they kind of made their way around there and then around the southern bit of China and then into Vietnam, which was controlled by France at the time, which I found interesting. Siam in this game, which is Thailand. It's been called by both names before. But if you're at all interested in history, this is a really good game to pick up. It's very fun. It's even multiplayer if you want to either help each other out or try to fight other players in conquering the world or defending it from the evil tyranny of fascism. Or communism, for that matter. The Soviets have a huge manpower pool that they can really use to overthrow a lot of the world. Like, all of this mass here in Western Soviet Union that's all people that they can throw into the meat grinder of their army. And yeah, you don't want to fuck with Russia because they have so many men, and then you let them stew for too long, they get the industrial capacity to really outproduce Europe as well. Can get pretty crazy. The problem that AI always seems to have is invading Britain. They always seem to struggle with that. Our assaults on China seem to be going rather well. Realistically, the Chinese army was horribly under-equipped, horribly manned. And they just weren't ready to take on the Japanese at the time, really. There's a silly movie I found out about recently, which is called The Worst War Movie of All Time. Because it's called Seven Man Army, and it's about these Chinese holding out against the Japanese attacks. And they throw tons of grenades, and instead of shooting people with guns, they have sword fights. And whenever one of them dies, he'll get bayoneted. And yeah, go look that up. Seven Man Army. It's an old Chinese movie about about a holdout that these Chinese soldiers did during the Japanese-Chinese War, and it's really interesting. Just not because the movie's any good, but because of how silly the movie is. It's just amazing that this kind of stuff has been happening within our lifetime. Oh, not our lifetime. This war happened within our grandparents' lifetimes. Like whole countries picking up rifles and marching into fields to shoot at each other until the war eventually ended. And then people like to, a lot of people like to think Germany had a chance at winning, and realistically, they didn't. They lost the war as soon as Britain declared war on them, because Britain alone probably could have beaten Germany. Would have taken a while. Would have had to starve them out again, like what happened in World War One. But it could have happened, because if you just look here, I'll pause it for a second. We got UK, all its puppets, which include Australia, New Zealand, bits of Malaysia, Canada, British Raj, which is India basically. And India alone has a lot of manpower, which I don't know if I can see from this screen, but they have a lot. I mean, fighting Japan as well, that probably evened the odds a bit. But the Canadians and the Americans helping definitely didn't give Germany much of a chance. Hold on, we're in 1938 and Germany hasn't even annexed Czechoslovakia. They haven't even taken the Sudetenland yet. I guess they do that later. But yeah, brief history of World War II for those of you who might not know. Germany ate Austria, annexed Austria, just marched in and say, okay, you're part of us now. Then later it annexed Czechoslovakia, and the Czechs asked Western Europe for help, and no one helped them. And it wasn't until they marched into Poland that Britain and France decided, right, that's enough. Which seems odd. You think they would have helped the Czechs out, because you can't see it here, but the Czechs actually had a lot of forts and a lot of defenses on their German border. And they could have held off Germany for long enough time than Polish ever had a chance at doing. The Polish army was not particularly modern. It had won the war against Russia in 1920, which is a war that many people don't know about. Russia marched into Poland, got to Warsaw, and the Polish army managed to defend Warsaw around the river and then push Russia back. And they've had this border since 1920. So yeah, that's Poland's biggest military achievement, is defeating Russia, which is really interesting. But against Germany, they didn't have much of a chance at all. But the Czechs did, because they had quite a modern army. They had some of the most modern tanks next to the French. The French and the Czechs actually had quite modern tanks. The British had the Matilda, which was quite good. But in 1939 or 1938, when Germany annexed Czechoslovakia, they could have fought back. If Britain and France had decided to help the Czechs then and there, they could have helped Czechoslovakia from getting annexed. Would have denied Germany a lot of manpower, a lot of equipment, and would have been, well, it potentially would have ended the war earlier. Especially if Russia had joined in, but Russia probably wouldn't have, because Russia wanted to stay out of the war. I mean, if you look at Operation Barbarossa later on, Germany just marched through Russia pretty easily for the first year until Russia got its act together. But you can tell in 1939, 1940, they were not ready for war due to a lot of reasons, especially the leadership purges that Stalin carried out. If you're interested in history, there's a really good podcast, which Gryphon also mentioned at some point. It was Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, which is a series of podcasts about various historical matters, which are rather fascinating. I'm currently re-listening to the World War I one, because Dan Carlin does a really good job on World War I. And World War One is a war that I don't think many people completely understand, because a lot of people, because of how many games and how many movies we've had about World War Two, people don't seem to know much about World War One. But in my opinion, World War One's more important than World War Two, and even though as much as I love World War Two, in the sense of learning about it, there's World War One was a much more brutal, complicated war. It wasn't such a clear and cut good guy bad guy situation when it came to World War One as there was in World War Two. And World War One was a horrible, bloody war. It was a lot of young men, around my age and younger, died. And I can't imagine going to a war at my age. I can't imagine people as young as me having to give their lives for their country. And I know this is, this obviously happened, but it's a thought that I find hard to grasp. Because people nowadays just don't seem to have the willpower for that. And I mean, here's a thought experiment. If for some reason North Korea invaded South Korea and we needed mass conscription from NATO countries, would we have enough young people who'd be willing to say, okay, that's fine, I'll join the army, I'll go help fight the evil North Koreans to help free South Korea? Would there even be enough people in this day and age to go and do that? Because I think we've become a lot more selfish since then. And I'm not saying this in a narcissistic, oh, look how bad people are now. I genuinely think people aren't as selfless and big-minded as we used to be. At least back in this day and age. I don't know if that's a sad thing or not, but it's not up for me to decide, is it? That also makes me think about compulsory military service. Because some countries still have it, like Germany. I think Kazakhstan, there's probably plenty more that I can't think of off the top of my head. And from what I've heard from plenty of people, and I guess I'll find out when I hit my own army training at Phase 1 training, is definitely instills a sense of selflessness and helps mature you as a man. Because if you look at the feminization and the despising of anything male nowadays, men are always the big bumbling buffoon. Men can't be strong or suave anymore, and those who are normally vicious, murdering brutes like James Bond. Nanjing has fallen for the Emperor. We're close to getting Hangzhou, and then then we've linked up our south and our northern forces, which will be good. But being in the army definitely would give you a better sense of discipline and wouldn't make you ashamed of your white maleness that it seems the media wants you to feel shame for nowadays for some reason. I mean, if you look at history, white men have created a lot of stuff in Western culture. They've really done a lot. And, it wasn't the women storming the beaches in Normandy, as the saying goes. And as much as the support from women was beneficial towards the war effort and as strong as as forceful as they were, It still was the men going off to fight. And I'm not saying this in a sexist, oh, that's because they couldn't fight. Women could fight. In the Russian army, they used women for sniping and for frontline troops. And that was part of Russia's strategy for dealing with their short manpower, was to let women in the army. And it worked. They were apparently ferocious fighters. And women in the army isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. But I think biologically that's not how things have been for a long time. Because you can have few men and a lot of women, and your tribe can still reproduce and be healthy. But a tribe that loses all its women and has lots of men, that isn't a good thing for the longevity of the tribe. So that's one of the reasons biologically that that men are seen as disposable, because biologically we are. All you need is one guy, and the rest of us can go die and fight and whatever. And seeing yourself as a disposable male, I am not sure how to feel about that. I mean, because really that's what we are, isn't it? Just historically we've been disposable soldiers, and not just that, we've also been kings, we've also been inventors and writers, and a lot of the stuff that makes up civilization has been invented by men. And I think it's a real shame that we're told to be ashamed of the few bad things we did compared to all the great things we did. I don't think that's right. I think men have plenty of stuff to be proud of, and women have stuff to be ashamed of too. And just blaming one either way is not fair at all. I don't like being told that I'm wrong because of my gender and skin color. That's not cool. And if Japan had beaten China this fast, they wouldn't have struggled with America. They're just going to capitulate China, and then we're going to go beat America, boop, and then deal with Russia. Hopefully in that order. Russia does anything nasty to us, we have our little puppet with all his army just sitting here, being very helpful. I should probably request forces. Give me your entire army, please. Thank you. You need some soldiers? Take them from your puppet countries. They're probably going to be crap, but, you know, they'll help fill the holes in the line. The well-trained, well-equipped Japanese Imperial forces cannot do everything on their own, as hard as we try. There's another thought about war and how it sparks a lot of technology that makes civilian life better. Because a lot of the technology we use comes from military technology. Like the internet, computers, GPS, smartphones. All this stuff is military technology that came to a point where it was affordable for civilians, and now we have it. And originally it was designed to help armies kill people more efficiently. Yeah, as as sad or not as that might be, depends on your point of view. So it seems China just doesn't care about its western flank whatsoever. They've decided to stick their entire army, like, I don't know where they've stuck their entire army. Just casually encircling 3 divisions here, they don't seem to mind. But war is an interesting thing, because it tells us a lot about ourselves that we can only see when we're put in extreme circumstances. And people haven't had to do that. The last war, the major war that Britain's been involved in, was the Falklands, really. Because the Iraq and Afghanistan were just kind of, they were minor things. Comparatively, anyway, to major wars with actual real countries. Sorry if any Iraqis are listening. Iraq is definitely a country, but you know what I mean. I hope. So I'm going back to an earlier point about God. One thing that a lot of atheists, I think, have noticed and are struggling with themselves is, once you lose God, you need to replace him with something. And there's no clear-cut answer for that, because God and religion, they're more than just beliefs. They're an ideal. They're... Hold on, I need to get a cavalry division to stick there. Stop the people from... Do I have a cavalry division? I have one here. Where are you? Oh, Nanjing. Let's just stick you in Nanjing. There we go. But a lot of people don't seem to think about the fact that if they lose God, they need to replace him with something. Whether that just be for community or whether that be for ethics or ideals. And that's an argument I've heard from some religious people. And that's, without God there are no ethics. And that's not necessarily true. It's true for a lot of people. Because I think a lot of people don't think about it. But you need to think about why not killing people is a bad thing. Because we all know very obvious truths about either ourselves or the world we live in. And that's great. That's fine. But the deeper question is the why. Why do we do certain things? Why is it bad to steal? Why is blah 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 blah? And I think that's where philosophy comes in. And there's a really good book about ethical, rational arguments for ethics, and it's called Universally Preferable Behavior by Stefan Molyneux. I'm not going to spell that out. But if you go search up universally preferable behavior, you'll find it. It's a free audio book and readable book. And it's a very good argument as to why ethics don't have to be dogmatic. That ethics aren't about what's right or wrong, it's about what's preferable. Like, is it ethical to starve yourself? That's, but is it universally preferable behavior to starve yourself? No, that's a more easy to answer question. Because if it's universally preferable, it applies to everyone. And it's not ethics, it's behavior. Because not everything we do is necessarily an ethical thing. Like, whether or not to eat food isn't necessarily an ethical question. So if you're interested at all in modern philosophy, go check that out. It's a really interesting thing. How about I end this video once I get the People's Republic of China to capitulate? Oh no, they're not even close. China's pretty close. Need 30, just about 30% more victory points you get from capturing major cities or from just taking territory. So I need to conquer 30% more of China's landmass and they will capitulate. Which isn't far off because their national unity is very low, and national unity is the ability for a country to keep fighting once it loses territory in cities. So once it loses 65% of its base territory, or victory points as they're called, because each territory is worth 1 victory point, and cities are worth more. So once it loses enough, it will capitulate. People's Republic of China is probably going to be higher because communist countries tend to be a bit higher. 75%. Alright. But recently, if you're interested in Stefan Molyneux as a philosopher, I recently called in to his call-in show. It wasn't the best talk I've ever had, because I was quite tired at the time. But had a good chat about the ethics of having to fight in an army. And the question that he left with me, and that's really stuck with me ever since, is I have to put my consciousness in the hands of a government and hope that they put me in ethical situations. Which seems an odd thought. Yes, but I have to hope the army makes me go and fight people who deserve to be fought against. And that was a bit of a thought, because as sure I am about wanting my army career, it's, you gotta think about some things. And I semi-admitted that if I have to disobey orders to do something ethical and right, I might have to do that if I believe that's the right thing to do. And I don't know if other people would do similar things. I've heard stories of other soldiers doing stuff like this before, but most likely I'm probably not going to have to worry about this anyway. Because we're living in the most peaceful time in human history. There are less wars going on than ever before. There are less humans killing each other than ever before in human history. As much as people like to worry about ISIS and about situation in the Middle East, it's most likely not going to get much worse, as much as people don't like to think it is. Because the media just like to keep people worried and scared, because that's how they make their money, for one thing. Scared viewer is going to watch more news than one who isn't. And it's in their best interest to keep this fear-mongering about all the bad stuff that Trump's going to do and all this stuff. And I was a Trump supporter, and if you disagree with me, fine. You know, apples and oranges. But whether or not you think he's a good thing, ultimately, he's going to be the president now, despite some attempts otherwise. He's definitely going to be the president now, and it's in everyone's best interest for him to do a good job, whether you like him or not. And this is a really good time to be critical of him if he does anything bad, because this is an important time, the first few months of his campaign or his presidency, because this is his chance now to prove to us that the American people made a good decision voting for him. And we all know the media is going to be critical of him because the media hates Trump. And that's fine. But that's left the media in a bit of a black hole, because all these people who've been hating on Trump so far, even when he's done nothing wrong, like the recent the recent sex scandal, because for some reason the people who supported Hillary and Bill Clinton think that accusations of rape with no evidence are worth worrying about when Bill Clinton rape scandals. But it's crazy. And the leftist media now cannot come back on their anti-Trump rhetoric and suddenly decide, oh, Trump did a good thing. They're stuck now in this circle of self-fulfillment. They have to point out the bad things he does now, because that's what they've been saying he's going to do. They have no choice now. And let's be honest, the mainstream media is dying anyway. Not many people are paying attention to them. And online media is getting more and more traffic now, because, for one, the mainstream media lies a lot. And I find it ironic that the mainstream media broke the thing of fake news when they're one of the biggest propagators of fake news. It's crazy how much the media reflects on itself. And once the mainstream media withers and dies and disappears, which I don't think it will do that, because people said that about, radio when TV became a thing, and that's still around. It'll probably wither down to being more of an entertainment, broadcast, opinionated program than trying to pretend to be an actual here's the facts place. So once CNN and Fox and whoever else, in Britain we have the BBC, but that's a bit different. Well, we'll see how the world is once all that stuff's changed. And it's going to change. By the time people like me are old men, the world's going to be unrecognizable from what it is now. And just thinking about now plus 20, 30 years, it's going to be interesting. So, I am going to Trying to decide what to do. Do we go for Air Force? Do we go for Navy? Do we go for synthetic oil? We're gonna need that eventually once America starts getting annoyed at us. We should find our own faction. That's what we should do. Because then we can invade Germany later and turn the whole world into the Great Japanese Empire. But, that's pretty much all I have to say for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this just kind of stream of consciousness, which some people like, some people don't. This is for all the people who are lonely out there and have no one to talk with. And just to let you know, there are other lonely people there too that have things to say. There are other people out there who have interests that you might not necessarily like, but definitely get them to talk about their interests. Get them to... I mean, even if you're not interested in that, you'll learn something. People like me who are interested in history ask us about something about history we like, and you'll probably learn something that you might not have known. Ask them what their favorite gun is, what their favorite tank is, who their favorite army was, something like that. Just something arbitrary, and get a conversation going. And if history's not your thing, then there's plenty of other stuff you can talk about. You can talk about being lonely. And I think it's that conversation that's hard to have, isn't it? It's not just the conversation itself, it's also just starting it in the first place and getting people to open up about themselves. That can be hard, because we're told nowadays not to be emotional. We're told nowadays to keep everything to ourselves, and that's not good for connecting with people, is it? It's good for keeping yourself from being bullied, but most of us don't have to worry about that anymore, do we? Especially on the internet. Because if you get bullied, you can just block them. If you really have to resort to that. But anyway, I hope you guys are all doing really well. I hope I've given you a voice and some company for the last however long it's been. And I really wish you guys all the best. And feel free to have a chat and talk, and I hope to do more of these in the future. Thanks a lot for watching and helping me conquer China, and I'll catch you all guys later.